So, are either of you considering divorce is a question we'd ask. Then, do you remember the diagram that we have that talks about desire? Well, I'm not suggesting that you necessarily present it at this time, but it is a powerful thing. So they've basically given you a summary of what they think the problem is. They've gone into some deep description of what the problem is. I like to just look at them and say, hey, Buck, what kind of husband would you like to be? You just tell me. And hey, Buffy, what kind of wife would you like to be? So just ask them. Now, that's not meant to do anything complicated, but I'm going to take notes about what they said. Yeah. Just really take note. And you were, talking something about the other day when you were chatting with some folks. So I like to know which kind, because you can also use it when you come to the diagram on marriage. Again, we're not going to go through diagrams today, so don't anybody freak and think we're going to be here till 12 o'clock tonight, okay? Excuse me. And it wouldn't hurt for you to ask them, do you believe that? Of the other? I'm always interested. I'm just nosy. I'd just be interested to see what the response was. And we missed that before. I didn't tell that to you. And of course, I told you, ask one thing that would encourage. Now, one, I have found the three, you don't have to use this, but another option in getting the, if you don't feel like when they told you what was wrong, if you don't feel like that it got covered very well, sort of a backup plan approach that I use is these three questions. What do you want for you in the marriage, from your mate, whatever? What do you want from you? How do you feel when you don't get what you want? And what have you done so far to get what you want? Now, this is not a history. The purpose for this is not the history. It's if I think that I didn't get all the stuff on the front end. There's nothing magical about this. And of course, I have on there optional, what do you need to do? If for some reason, you remember before I asked you to ask them to name one thing that would encourage, would they be encouraged by it? Well, it would be my hope if you did choose to ask the fourth question there, that they would at least say the thing that the person told them that they needed to do. And you say, well, that's pretty elementary, Tim. When people are mad at each other, elementary works real well, okay? And again, just clarify. If you think you need to clarify or it's beneficial for you to say, okay, hey, look, guys, this is kind of the way it is as I see it. Now, from here, it's your turn, so to speak. Now, it's been your turn the whole way because you've been driving this car. But now it's your turn. This is what you're going to say. First of all, I'd like to suggest to you that you give them a map. You're going to give them a map where you're headed. There's some practical discipleship matters. And I just tell them, look, there's some things that we call practical discipleship. They're just everyday issues that are not the main issue. They're some of the symptoms that you guys deal with. And you guys have got to make it through the next few weeks for me to have any benefit for you at all, and for God to do whatever He's got to do. And so, for instance, practical discipleship matters might be this. If every day, 6 times a day, somebody's threatening to get a divorce, you just say, listen, do you think you could keep a lid on that comment for during the time while we're doing this? We're going to be meeting several weeks together. Could you just keep a lid on that? And if they say, well, why? And I say, well, I can tell you, if I was married to you and you threatened me every other day, I'd just give up. And I'm thinking, since you're sitting here, there's something in both of you that assumes that there's some point that we might be trying to do something to get this place back together. I just don't want you wounding each other so horribly during the time we're trying to get you some help that it just undoes everything that we do when we get in here together. That's all we're asking for. Common sense stuff. In other words, we don't want you dead at the end of this thing, either emotionally or physically. So that's a practical discipleship matter. I'm just going to give you a couple, 3 examples. Another practical discipleship matter might have to do with finance. If you don't know, that's one of the bigger issues. It has to do with people and their finances. Excuse me. For instance, I had one couple, and the wife admitted that she punished first day right out of the box. She said, I asked her what she had done to get what she wanted from him, and she said, oh, that's easy. I make sure that I can max every credit card we got as many times as possible, and I make sure I don't let him know. Well, that was pretty brazen. And I said, well, listen, could you do me a favor during this time? Could you cool it on the credit cards for crying out loud? You know it makes him mad. And I said, this is not hard. I said, do you like not have clothes? You can't eat? Do you not have any budget at all? I said, look, all I'm asking is for that. The primary part we're doing is going to be at least for the next 3 months. So all I'm asking is that you just cool it on doing things on purpose that you know that are going to drive him nuts. Well, she laughed and said, yeah, I can do that. Nobody just ever asked me not to do it.
Oh,
And I thought, oh yeah, I bet he hadn't asked you. But I didn't argue with her. She said, so that's, and again, does that fix the marriage? No. But I don't have, in other words, I'm looking for the issues that if they happen, they get so enraged in their emotion that it gets so stirred up, they can't process with me. The only people that I haven't gotten to the root problem with are the ones that wouldn't talk to me. I mean, really. Because it's honestly, it's not rocket science in terms of what the root problem becomes if you follow the model that we're presenting. And I'm not even saying that arrogantly. If that's come across arrogantly, I don't mean that. I have had people, and it just happened this last year. There's a fellow there in the church, and he saw where we were headed. I'd met with them about 4 times. And we actually made some progress on some practical discipleship items. In other words, they stopped doing the stuff right that second that they were beating each other half to death with. But after we got out of that, so he was just happy as Larry because she was doing what he wanted now. And she was okay because at least he was making a try. But as soon as we started getting close to what some of the root rot was for him, because she said, I would like to do my history first, which I'll get to in just a second. So we did do her history first. Well, he knew his was coming up, and he never showed again. Now, it just so happens I know about his history from other sources, but no, we did not get to his issue because he wouldn't talk. If they will talk, that part will come out. When they come, seriously, and if I got it as a couple, this is what I'll say. I'll say, listen, I need to have one meeting with you guys apart for 1 week, and then we're going to come back together. And I bring her in and I say, listen, I just want to warn you, I'm gonna bury your husband here next week. I mean, if he's a doer and he's the scenario you're describing, he's being obnoxious and so on and so forth. I'm not trying to get an alliance with her. What I'm doing is warning her. I just tell her, I'm going to make your husband mad. He'll either submit to what I'm saying or he's going to be ticked off. And I'm going to tell him that I told you that. So there's not going to be any secrets with anybody, anyway, no how. I just wanted you to know so you know to duck. If it's that, I don't mean physically duck, but just emotionally duck. You follow what I'm saying? And so she just knows, and then when he comes in, said, I just want to tell you, I talked to your wife. I met with her first. I had a very nice meeting with her. Here's generally what we talked about here. And I just want you to know, I warned her that I was going to make you mad today. And he says, oh, you aren't going to make me mad. Typical doer. He's trying to smooth over, and he knows where we're going. And I just say, hey, listen, you got to decide whether or not we're going to keep on with this. I didn't want to embarrass you in front of your wife, and I didn't tell her what I was going to make you mad about. I just told her that I might say some things that you wouldn't agree with, and I just wanted her to know you might be mad, and that's fine. I'm a big boy, I can take you being mad. So I just regurgitate everything I said to her. I tell him, and then I just say, look, I really think you can get on with this, but right now you're doing what we call in the South a shuck and jive. You think you're telling me what I want to hear, so I'll leave you alone, so nobody will get into your head. I don't want to be in your head. Listen, man, I got lists of people that want to meet with me, and what I want to know if you want to get on with this or not. Now, this is a doer. This is the only person I'd ever talk to like this. And he says, "Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean?" And so I just say it right straight out. Here's what you've been doing that's been deflecting every single thing I mean, you haven't gotten straight with me. Listen, you can tell me I'm whatever you want to call me, but are we going to do this thing or not? I really think we can press on with this. And then he'll make a decision, and I'll tell him that, hey, listen, I'm going to call your wife up after I'm done. I'm going to just tell him what the decision is. Because I want her to hear it from me, because I know I told her I wasn't keeping any secrets with anybody. So that's the way I handle an uncooperative doer. Most of the time, their testosterone levels will rise at that point, and they'll say, okay, go ahead and take a shot at me, man. Now, this is a man-to-man kind of thing. Okay, you understand? No, I'm not, and maybe But what I'm telling you is that from that context, if you got a misogynist, man-hater, and he's a doer, and all that magic's going on, and a woman, you may have some issues to deal with there in terms of you may not be able to get past that with him. And therefore, we might want to bring some other folks in, that kind of thing. So there's some practical discipleship matters we're going to deal with. But so just understand each week there may be from time to time some little things like that. The second thing I want you to see is we're going to give you a test. So you're going to explain what the unique self-test is. You're going to administer tests, give it to them, explain that it's just what's normal for you, that kind of thing like that. Excuse me. And it'll help give me some direction about how to help you. Third, in the next session, I'm going to take your history. Again, it's not psychotherapy, the same description I gave you before. You remember that? Fourth, I'm going to answer 3 questions for you over a series of weeks. Why do the two of you act as you do? How can you stop without effort? And how can you stay stopped? I think I've heard those questions somewhere before. All right. Fifth, what is all this going to accomplish? If you'll note so far, I've given the thinker a plan. I've told the feeler we're going to talk about his emotions and what he feels about the whole thing. And now I'm giving the doer a very clear path of what we're going to accomplish. This is where we're headed. Going to give you an understanding of what strengths and weaknesses you bring into the marriage. You'll discover how you are contributing to the problem. You'll discover how you might be helping to move towards a healthy solution. You'll discover the root problems in your marriage and your life. And you'll discover specifically how Christ can impact your marriage getting better. That's where we're headed. That's what we're going to accomplish. Each when they come in, again, you give them a brief opportunity to do the declaration, and here's why. One, they're going to tell you anyway. We already said that, but here's the other. What I love about Jesus, among other things, is you can't even begin to believe how many times they come in to tattle on each other, and it's dead on what I'm going to talk about that day. And I'll just say, well, it just so happens that today's it. So I want them to tell me that because they can't run away and say, oh, I didn't act like that, or that wasn't the behavior, or that, that kind of thing like that. They're there in all their nakedness. On the other hand, they might tell me something that the prompting in the Spirit tells me that my diagram thing goes to the side, or the order that I was going to do it in. For example, you might have somebody that says, I am so confused about what to do about this thing that's coming on right now. And I just feel like 1 minute I think this and 1 minute I think that. I've pulled couples aside and said, can we just put the marriage away for a minute, the issues we're working on, and let's talk about, because I'm talking to the new believers, let's talk about how I can hear from God and make a decision. I understand you guys still hate each other's guts. Right now we're talking about you got a decision to make about your kid and what they're going to do. Well, I got news for you. They love you for that, and here's the beauty. You're going to come back later on when they do decision making about each other, and you help them there, and you're going to say, well, listen, we want to talk about the same thing again. So that's why it's wonderful to have them have an opportunity to declare. Each week when they come in, I talked about that. So 13, there are several jumping off places with people, and I'm not saying these are the only ones. These are just several that I've used. So again, we've gone through everybody with me so far on the process of they come and sit down in the office. Here's how we track through. The goal of these approaches is to show the couple that you have identified with their problem and they have some idea that you've heard their need. We're still in the first session with them. We haven't taken a history because that's going to be the next week, you understand? Unless you just happen to have a big long session with them. But there's a jumping off place. And I'm not saying you can't come back to these diagrams. The goal is not to present the whole wad of diagrams you have either individually or divorce necessary, not divorce, but marriage diagrams. But for instance, the whole idea of emotional divorce, I think Linda, you might have been talking about that the other day. Just a simple explanation of that one diagram. I've had people go, yeah, that is us. That's us right now. That's why we started off together and we just went more apart. And I'll say, oh, really? What were some of the things that happened that pushed you guys, that kind of made you emotionally divorced? You go, oh, well, and this and this and that. And see, now they think, as far as they're concerned, they're airing dirty laundry. What you're aware of is you're getting them to identify with the fact that you knew what was going on with them when they walked in the door. And you could say, so would you guys agree that you're probably at this point of emotional divorce now? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's us. That's exactly, yeah. Oh, that's it. And then one of the things, there's many points to be made with that diagram, But one of the points, do you remember, that we make on this diagram is that, you familiar with what I'm talking about when I say the emotional divorce thing, right? Everybody with me? One of the points we make on the diagram is this, that when you get at this emotional divorce, if in your mind getting a divorce is not okay, what you'll do is you'll pick a fight with the other person to get a reaction out of them, so you can get madder at them, so you can pick another fight to get a reaction out of them to justify that they really are a horse's patoot, and it does make sense for you to leave them. You follow what I'm saying? Yeah. Well, Yeah, okay. Now, here's the beauty of it. They have probably already told you when they were presenting their problem how they were doing that. Now, I don't mean this arrogantly, but the beauty of it is you just read their mail. And they didn't even know it, but in their mind, you at least know what it's like. You may not have a solution. That may be that jury may still be out, but they're identifying with the fact that you recognize some of the things that happen in a marriage setting. That's all we're saying. So that's one. And again, we're still in the fourth session. We told them where we're going to go, what we're going to do. But you say, listen, before you leave today, could we just do just a little something on your marriage thing? Here's one. And is there a magic marker in here? I mean, a marker thing? Oh my, oh my, oh my. Here, I'll just use this. I'm going to do it on the top of this. This is a beautiful thing. Draw your problem circles. Remember, we used 4 of them with the students. This is what you feel about at your best. This is your true identity. What you feel about yourself at your worst. Here's the event, and here's the problem. What is the deal here? Well, this is what I do. I just go ahead and do 2 of them right on top of each other. Now, here's the beauty. So I do their individual one for each other. And the goal is not to spend a bunch of time on this. You can come back to it and go through it again. I'll say, okay, this event happens, and you do their desired impression, all that. This event oh, here we go. Now it's writing. Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. So we've got these 4 circles. Best, worst, event, and problem. And we got this. This is the husband. Here's the wife. Best, worst, event. Now, I just say, listen, why don't you just tell me, we're not going to settle the argument, but why don't you just tell me the last argument you guys had, where one or both of you ended up so mad you couldn't spit straight. Now, I say, listen, we're not settling it today. I'm not the referee. I just want to know the facts. What the facts as you see them. Well, of course, I will go ahead. They'll tell me that, and then I'm going to go and say, okay, why don't you tell me about what desired impression you'd like to have. This is how I've still got some time. If they haven't gone on forever, I might use this one. Or I might use it the first thing in the next time they come in. But tell me about, what you feel about yourself at your worst. And I get that feeling for both of them, and then I take that event. And so, for instance, it might be the husband came in and he wiped his feet on the rug. Yeah, the duck story. Yeah, the ducky rug, okay? And I show them how he felt like he was just too stupid to figure it out. He was this and not this. And he got angry and he made a jab of a comment. Well, because he's a Christian, he feels like, oh, I'm a bummer. But guess what? His jab went right into her event circle. And by the way, where did his event come from? Well, it came from her. So she's feeding his event circle. And this is the funny thing about it. You can track what happened with one event or a couple of events or a series of events, and it gets so confused in there, they just keep feeding each other's circle. And this is what you want to say. For right now, especially if you're doing the first session, does that pretty much describe what happens at your house? Oh, yeah, it really does, man. Oh, man, And they'll go off and tell the world you're the smartest counselor that ever walked on the planet. Yeah. Discipler on the planet. Now, you can come back to this later. Don't dump all your hay at the same time. All you're trying to do is help them understand that you're headed in a direction and you know exactly what you're doing, which you really don't, but Jesus knows what you're doing. But we're not going to go into the semantics, splitting hairs, you know. All right, another one you can use is the idea of the perception glasses. Remember that diagram? Mike just went over that some. There's actually one in the regular notebook. And another one, Mike talks about it, I believe, pretty sure this is in the book, the idea of a rose, about the rock factory. Maybe it's not in the book. Okay, well, but there's the rock factory, and whatever you put in the rock factory comes out of rock. You put if you're mad at each other and you perceive each other a certain way, a husband came home a rose, it goes into the rock factory, it comes out of rock. She's saying, well, he's only doing this to get out of trouble. Brings a card home, he's already doing this because he forgot the thing, and so on and so on and so forth. Well, again, I'm not looking for a big, long explanation. All I'm looking to do is to have you, with the tools you have, identify with them. Just some sense of identification. We're not in a hurry. We're not trying to get all rambunctious here and give them the whole load of hay. But those are some things that you can do. 14, tell them you're probably that it's very likely you're going to meet for around 12 weeks. You're not guaranteeing it'll only be 12 weeks. If it's less, you'll be happy about that. But the follow-up is going to be every 2 to 4 weeks after that. And just, are you going to commit to be involved in this process? I mean, it could easily be, we talked to somebody brought up a 6-month commitment the other day. I mean, it could easily be that.
Is it once a week?
Yeah, once a week at least. If they're in crises, you might end up meeting with them a little bit more than that. And again, I don't care if you meet with them 4 days in a row. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just trying to give you a format if this is tracking along in a normal setting kind of situation that's sort of built relationally as well. Here's a caution. You want to caution them again. You're likely to be at emotional lows with each other. Be careful about emotional attachments. And I define a date as a date is where two people of the opposite, now you got to say the same, or the same sex, share emotional support or energy with each other. That's if homosexuality is an issue. This can even include sharing woes with someone of the opposite sex who is struggling in their marriage. Just because your intent may be innocent doesn't mean you can't get caught up in the trouble. And again, all I'm talking about is practical matters so that we don't undo what we're preparing to get to be done with them. Because if you want to complicate it, just put a third person in it. Even if it's a third person they haven't had one official date with. All right? And finally, if you have only a short period of time, you can move on to the circuit for each person and then move into the marriage diagrams, meaning what Ray and Mike went over with you. And the diagrams of Bury Your Marriage are very helpful in that. In other words, what I'm saying is if you've got somebody dropped you in the middle of a situation where you got a couple of days to meet with these folks, you're not going to have time to go through all the basic diagrams individually with all of them and then do the marriage diagrams. Go to your circuit, do the circuit, and then get on to the marriage diagrams that are there. And I'm not going through those right now. If you don't feel like you're comfortable on those, again, you're going to need some more information and practice, and Mike has actually new diagrams to go with that. Excuse me. Let me impress something upon you. So if the couple commits to do the whole several-month process, then you make sure you follow procedures 1 through 15, and then move into the marriage diagrams. Again, it may be helpful to point out that if the two people in the marriage are first fixed, so to speak, it will significantly impact how the marriage goes. In other words, they think that they want you to give them a pill that'll make all the marriage issues go away. What I want to do is make sure they understand that each one of you have bought, I believe we call it baggage. Everybody's heard that, even if they brought some baggage in. And I just want to make sure what we're dealing with before we start talking about all the marriage stuff. There are people who will get impatient with you about that. They'll want you dealing on the front end with it. And if they get terribly impatient, then, kick to the circuit and go for it and use it. I mean, I'm not saying it has to be in this exact form, but I will tell you, the beauty of it is the longer they're in the process of moving towards a solution, a better chance you've got for some success with them in terms of how Christ can work in their heart and mind and life. And here's the point, the other point in terms of why there's a strong case for doing some work individually with the people. Some of the questions that usually come up, and I'll say them to you now, are you going to do their histories right there in front of each other? You don't have to, but I usually try to. And you know why? Some couples have never heard the hurt that's in the other's history. Here's another thing. Even if they have heard it, they're going to hear me reacting with compassion and understanding and designating that this is a significant matter. If I got some hard-nosed, bull-faced guy sitting beside me that thinks she just ought to get on it and get over it, and he sees me, I play pretty hard. I don't usually do those hard line things like I was describing to you, but I'm a man, and I do the man thing when I do counseling, okay? And so for a man to hear me say to his wife, this is just the man thing, okay, ladies? I'm not trying to leave you out. But for him to hear me say, listen, man, I tell you what, I think I'd have just been dead if I'd experienced what you experienced, and mean it and genuinely understand what's going on, what's he going to say? Oh, no, she's just a big wuss. Although I did have one guy do that, and that's another guy I fired. Well, maybe, okay, so every once in a while I go crazy. But my point is your investment in the compassion can model just how devastating those things could have been for that individual. And a lot of times what will happen is one of them will bail on you because they wanted the quick fix to have happen. That's fine. I've still got one person that I can move on in Christ. And see, the beauty of that I'm going to move through this model with them is that whether both of them are doing it with me together or not, it hasn't changed my plan of where I'm headed. She or he may have to live with something when they go home that's going to let them, they're going to hit the brick wall of trouble and they're going to have to turn to Christ a lot quicker. Well, amen to that. So it all works for us. That's what we're saying. But an excellent point. Look, this is the way we do this. We're not the only people in town. Honestly, I believe this can help you. It's radically transformed my life. The one thing that I've done in situations like that is I will give the person an example of why I think doing this individually and finding out your own stuff individually, how I think that could directly impact their marriage. And so I'll give them one example. This thing right now is burying you with your wife, or this thing right now is burying you with your husband. I'm telling you, we're going to be looking at a way that Christ can actually work that and beyond your wildest dreams about that particular issue in your life. And let's just turn to your wife right now, or let's just turn to your husband right now and just ask, if he genuinely had this thing that wasn't present in him anymore, would that impact you at all? You see what I'm saying? And so sometimes they'll go, well, or she'll go, Now, if they're determined to leave, they'll leave, obviously. But yeah, that's an excellent response. So I like taking the histories together if I can pull it off at all. There are some times when you'll have somebody, if there's, especially if there's been some abuse, some pretty serious abuse go on, they're afraid to take a history together. And of course, obviously I'm going to need to respond to that because they may need some freedom to say some things. And I haven't forgotten your questions, so just hang on with me. Another thing is when we're doing the circuits, this kind of thing, not even at the beginning. I like doing those things again together because they see me do two things. First of all, they see me, so if it's husband and wife, sees me say his reactions are his deal. He's angry because of what's inside him, not because of what she's doing. But he also hears me say that when she does this, it is a catalyst for her. So I give proper acknowledgement to that which is the catalyst or the springboard for this stuff. But then I also lay the responsibility, if you will, with the person that it lies with. And so all of this blame, well, if she'd have done this or hadn't done that. So for instance, a typical comment you get in a marriage setting is, well, if he just wasn't such an idiot when he came home, I'd be perfectly fine. Right? All right. Well, that's really interesting. Excuse me. So you're telling me he's an idiot and you lose it. So let me get this. This stupid idiot moron husband of yours is controlling your whole life. You're in good shape. I really like the way that's working out. Could we go ahead and tell everybody Sunday morning what a great life you have because you're controlled by the weakest person you know? You see how that works for you in the connection point? So if you'll just be patient to take the time to do this, they're hearing what you're getting from the other one. And the beauty of it is, you'll actually have couples say, whoa, hey, wait a minute, I'm not the one that made you mad. Now, they'll try to manipulate that, and we'll bring that back into line when they come in. But you can see how that would work out. All right. The question came up about abuse stuff, and then we're going to do one more thing. We are not going to meet this evening at all, so just let you know. So we'll plow through, give you a little break here, and so on. One of the other things that we want to look at, when I answer her question, and let me just rephrase it. Your question is what if I've got someone that's seriously involved in alcohol, that kind of thing like that? There are a series of things that we might look at. Obviously, if they're stoned, and if there's going to be not a whole lot we can accomplish along the way, right? Especially if they're coming into the session stoned. And so we're going to make as many efforts to just say that outright. Listen, I want to help. I'm not trying to bail on you, but just very firmly, I'm going to need your cooperation by doing whatever you can do. If we need to go get you some anti-abuse, I mean, at this point, I'll settle for anything to get their head clear. Is kind of where I'm at on that, and obviously would suggest some detox kinds of things. I would put all that under practical discipleship kinds of things. But the other part is, and I'm just going to say this briefly. I hope I don't create about 20 questions because I don't have time for them. But in the issue of when abuse is happening and things like that, really where we approach that is this. And there's lots of dynamics with abuse, and especially if you move into the physical abuse. But actually, although it's not all legally wrong, there are actually 17 different kinds of abuse that have been categorized. And all of them, the center of them are power and control. And so I understand there's probably different levels of response based on whether or not it's gotten physical or not and those kinds of things. And that's not our purpose here today to cover that. But let me just say this, that one of the single most loving things a husband or a wife could do for each other, for a person who is continuing to escalate in abuse, is say, we're not doing this anymore, and I'm not talking about the marriage. I am not going to create a situation that I put myself or our children in harm's way. And so here's the deal. I love you. I'm going to keep working on this marriage. But I will not be beat up by you anymore. And so one practical discipleship step, and I've had to do this in counseling, is I've just said, because it's come up, and I just say to the wife and or husband, whichever it's been, 95% of the people that are abused are women, 5% of them are men, and I'm talking about physical abuse here. This is what we tell them. Okay, there's been abuse happen in the past, and so whichever one's doing the abusing, I just want you to know something. I'm instructing your wife right now, or your husband right now, that the next time you come after them physically, I prefer they just call the police. But I'm going to give her my cell phone number. I'm going to give him my cell phone number, and they can call me and put me on fast dial if they won't call the police, and I'm calling the police, and I'm coming over. And I want you to understand, I'm going to do everything I can possibly do in my own power. I know the judge here in the county, and you're going to be in jail for a very long time if I have anything to do with it. Now, my only goal is to scare the bejeebies out of them. Because right now, that's the only thing they're going to move off of is fear. Now, I'm not trying to keep them, and of course, if they're mad, they'll get mad at me about all that. But then this is what I tell them. Look, you know what? In my flesh, all I really want to do is beat the living daylights out of you. But I love you enough that I am not going to let this happen, and I'm going to fight until you move out of this with Christ's help. So you can either choose to do this the easier way or the hard way. It's all going to be hard, but there could be the hardest way. And I'm not playing, and we're not joking. I have had a few people say, well, I can just get a lawyer. And I said, mate, go ahead, get a lawyer. I got more insurance than I can shake a stick at. So just come on down. And I know I got guys on my board that'll support me and so on. So, and obviously a lot of times that ends up being the men. But a practical discipleship matter is this. You are not loving someone by allowing them to continue in this path of destruction on yourself and other people. And that's exactly what we communicate to them. So when it comes to denying self and taking up the cross and so on and so forth, that's really kind of where we land on that kind of thing. All right. Let me take a drink here. Where are we at, brother? All right, good. Any more questions about that? So can you see that model? What I don't want you going out of here, either with an individual or with a couple, there's nothing complicated about what I said at all. This is not rocket science. But sometimes if you don't know exactly how to sort of kind of lead into the diagrams, you kind of sort of want to know what's going to come next. You've given them a definitive plan. You said, here's the motto we're going to use. And I just come in and say, today's the question we're still answering is, how did I get the way I am? Or how do I stop? Or how do I stay stopped? Yeah, yes. And right now, the practical discipleship matters I've been talking about right now have more to do with, my only goal is, if they are so wrapped up in destroying each other while we're talking, I can't have a conversation with them as we're moving along. Now we're going to move into what practical discipleship matters might be and what happens in terms of follow-up and those kinds of things. So if you'd go to your follow-up sheet, please. And we'll finish that. Well, I've got it here somewhere. It should say just follow-up on it. Oh, yeah, here it is. Follow-up in great big letters. It's one of the first ones. Okay. Each discipler should schedule follow-up with his or her disciple. And obviously there's some flexibility with this, but rely on God for how quickly and how much and how often. We suggest that it could be easily appropriate for you to be following up with them several months afterwards, meaning they're just kind of coming back and you're refocusing them. Let me give you some key thoughts and then I'll answer Linda's and any other questions that might be there specifically. Here's the key things we want to be looking for in follow-up. You're going to help them recognize how and when he or she has closed the door to Christ's life and has turned to idols. What occurred at the moment? What part of their old identity were they being reminded of? In other words, what was getting stirred up in the hotel of their mind? What's the flesh pattern that they still were moving in? Excuse me. 2, help the disciple to deal candidly with sin and understand why it was going on, and again, returning them to focus on Christ to walk out of it. We don't want them to have an unhealthy focus on sin. Nor do we want them to say, well, listen, you told me no matter what I do, Christ is going to hang on to me, so I'm just not worrying about anything. Yeah. And so we want to, I don't have a whole lot of people go there, but I do have some on occasion move there. 3rd, walk the disciple through the process of taking every thought captive and evaluating both their thoughts and their emotions and discuss whether or not these should be accepted or rejected. In other words, there's some points of failure they probably experienced or there are points of pressure they were experiencing. And so one of the discussions we're going to have, I might go back and pull out the diagrams and go through it again. But I might have them say, okay, why don't you tell me 2 or 3 of the times. You seem a little confused about thus and so. Let's talk about what was happening then, what the thoughts you were having, and so on and so forth. And again, dialogue with them using as many examples from yourself. This is what we're doing during follow-up, because see, that we've already laid out the foundation for them. You think about when you've come to some of these conferences and you haven't been here for training, what happened? People were talking about it, even here this week. I've talked to several people, and they're reprocessing some things and gaining some further understanding of how that impacts them as a person. And that's one of the things that you want to be doing. Number 3, during follow-up. And then 4, encourage the disciple as he or she progresses in their process of the Christian growth by pointing out all that Christ has done in their life up to that point. Because here's the point. One of the things the enemy whispers to people that are moving on is you're not far enough. You ought to be a lot further along than you are right now. And so those are the general ideas that we want in follow-up. Here's the procedure. You set up the meeting with the disciple. Again, we're recommending at least once a month. You might need every couple of weeks on the front end just after you've gone through all the diagrams with them and answered all 3 questions. Again, you need to be remembering that the location could be important for private use. But here's the key. This is not just a time just to visit. You can just visit if you want to take some extra time, but you have definitive goals that you're trying to accomplish with them. Your goal is to process through with them how they're doing and how Christ is moving in their life and answering many of the questions that we've talked about. Do you remember, how many of you read Problems, God's Presence, and Prayer? Can you remember that in there? There's a whole chapter on faulty definitions. one of the things you'll deal with your disciple as you work with them is this issue of faulty definitions. They define how far they ought to be and that they ought to be far further along, or they'll misdefine what denying oneself, which is going to answer part of the issues that you're asking about, Linda. What does denying oneself and taking up the cross look like for them? Here's a typical misunderstanding. Feelers think, I'm being really spiritual because I'm not fussing at the people that are abusing me. Well, isn't denying oneself for a feeler sometime speaking up rather than keeping silent? And for the doer, keeping their big trap shut instead of just speaking all the time and so on? Well, again, those are the kinds of things that we want to dialogue with them. All we're doing is saying, we said there are certain principles that Christ interacts with people on. That's what we said. Well, either that's true or it's not. And I want to go back and revisit with them those issues and how they might be struggling with some of those principles that we've given them. Some of the questions you might ask, of course, you can give them additional study materials and all that. How's it going? Do you perceive you've been abiding in Christ or not? If they respond by saying things are great, be glad for them, but also warn them that Satan might give them a law and then wham them. If things are okay, make a note of the battles and the victories the disciples has won. This is for later use when they need to remember what Christ has been doing. If things are horrible, have them describe what's horrible specifically, why they aren't doing well. And for instance, one of the things that Karen and I do often for each other is when I'm whirling in my if it's depression or I'm just kind of feeling like there's this big cloud, we start just surfacing what all that sounds like, what it looks like, and try to find out is this the enemy's voice or not? Is God trying to tell me something in this? And if it is the enemy's voice, what good purpose could come from all this? What's coming down the pike? What are we in the middle of right now? You follow what I'm saying? Those kinds of questions. Lead the disciple into any important evaluation of events that have been mentioned. And it's sort of as if they are being reenacted verbally so that we can see, again, where's the place to deny myself, to take up the cross, and so on. Sometimes horrible feelings have occurred because of some hidden attacks by the unholy Trinity. If the source of these feelings are unknown, you can just pretty much be assured, in other words, they have no center, it's from the enemy. And you need to encourage them to dismiss them. And also I point out to you that both in Sidetracked in the Wilderness and in Problems, God's Presence, and Prayers, they talk about, Mike does a very excellent job of describing the whole idea of fears that I might have from abiding. I'm telling you, a really good thing you can do once you have worked through with your disciple is to go back, reread those ideas of the fears you had, and maybe ask some questions. You're not trying to create fear in them, but ask questions to sort of figure out. Because again, the reason it's in both books is because they're very common fears that people experience. So again, we're not looking at rocket science here. We're just looking for a way that we can interact with people's life. If nothing can be found, assume that there's a hidden attack and pray with the disciple, encouraging them to give up those lying emotions to the Lord. Again, help them deal candidly with sin. Don't let them wash it, dance around it, anything like that. And that's kind of the follow-up process as such. Now, Linda's asking, what are some of the practical discipleship matters that we do with folks? Well, here's some things that we would do, Linda. Excuse me. Some more examples. So let's say I got a couple, I've gone through the diagrams, met with them a couple of times, and we're dealing with what denying self is and all that. All of the practical discipleship matters, I usually try to funnel in the categories of, am I reacting out of something I think's a lie that's the truth? Have I got a faulty definition? Is this a matter of I need to be denying myself? Is this a matter that I need to take the death blow? Is this in other words, those kinds of categories, and the reason I say this, maybe part of it's just because I'm a simpleton and I have to keep things pretty categorized for myself, but the beauty for me is I double dog dare you to find out an issue in communication or expressing love to a mate that doesn't fit under deny oneself, take up the cross and follow, or judging your thoughts and emotions. Let me give you a couple examples. Now, I may then look at communication matters, and people might be mishearing some things. But here's the beauty of it. The question I want to know, if my mate says something to me and I hear, what was that ridiculous, Don was talking about, something was pretty funny, where he was talking to him, Luann. Luann says, man, I really wish we had, what was it? Yeah, I wish it was warmer in here. And he said, and I hear, oh, I'm a bum, and if I made more money and so on and so forth. Well, you know what? That does happen. Well, I got two ways that I can approach that. Woo! I might say to them, here's a healthy way to have a conversation, but you know what the root issue is? Don has got a problem in his identity. He's got an issue still to be addressed in him. Because the truth is, if Don didn't feel like a failure in that situation, he wouldn't be responding in that way, would he? Now, he was giving us an example. I'm not trying to beat up on Don, just for the sake of the camera. But I have an identity issue yet to be dealt with in Don in that matter. There's nothing wrong if I see that, excuse me, I might say to Don, as a stopgap measure, Don, when you heard that and you felt yourself escalating, buddy, is your mouth broke? Can you go to Christ and then say, Lord Jesus, help? Lord, I'm here, I'm feeling, I've got the 30-second window or the 10-second window or the 15 or whichever one you're going to choose. And Lord, I really want to understand here because I'm having trouble seeing her condition rather than what she said. And he thinks it's her condition and it's not even her. She just wanted to be a little warmer in the place. You follow what I'm saying? So what I would encourage you to do is that there are some nice things, and I mean this truly. There are some very clear-cut materials out there that talk about just some general communication kinds of things that are good with couples, right? That's cool. I'm not against, and I do have people use and utilize those kinds of things from time to time. I sometimes will use a basic one to show just how screwed up they are in the way they're communicating with each other at a particular moment. Oh, I probably wouldn't use that particular word with them at that tender moment. But here's when you bring in some other resource, whether it's a good video that's there that talks some about communication things, this is what I do for one couple. They were having some trouble with some of their communication issues, and Smalling had a very excellent thing. It was about a 20-minute bleep about how the communication thing went back on. I showed that to them, and the guys responded, and I know we're running out of film here. I'm going to finish.
You still have 9 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to finish up here. The guy looks at it and he says, oh yeah, that's going to happen in my house. Because to him, it sounded real kind of fakey, kind of, it feels weird. But that was his response. His wife said, well, that'll never happen at our house. And it's because she was hurting from the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying it. Smalling did an excellent job, and I said, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to look at why those folks are responding the way they are. And so what I made them do, I said, let's just choose this, because see, by this time we spent a lot of time talking. Let's choose this issue that you guys had a discussion about. Now, the question is not whether or not you can do that, because that's pretty simple. I mean, it's not, you heard some of the stuff she was doing the other night. It's not that difficult to say what you're thinking and drop the attitude and all that from simply actually doing those things. The question I want to know is why you got an attitude. Because if I nail that one to the wall, guess what? You may not still know how to live with somebody that's nice. You may not know how to live without sarcasm, but I got news for you. If I take care of the root issue that has to do with your sarcasm, when I give you a way to move, you're going to say, thank you so much. And now it's not a chore for you to do or something you have to hammer into yourself. It just naturally flows out of what Christ is doing in you. So that would be an example of a discipleship thing. So, for instance, I have several little discipleship tools that I use, and some of them are just things I would go over with people. Some of them are things, there's scads of discipleship videos out there, and therefore, it's wonderful to have those kinds of tools out there for you. But if you use them in place of helping a person identify what self has to be denied, if you use them in place of them depending on Christ to check the attitude for them at a particular moment, all you've done is give them something to do that they can do in their flesh. And I'm going to try, so hear me clearly. I am not slamming, I repeat, I am not slamming the many aids that we have out there that are excellent. But just like we've said, and everything else we've taught about, everything else we do, the motive and the source is everything. That's what we're trying to say. And so now let me communicate. So that would be an example of a discipleship type deal. We run an abuse program for people who are involved in physical abuse at our church. I had a fellow that I was working with, and you know what? For whatever reason, it just was not getting through to this guy, and he was incredibly emotionally abusive to his wife. And I just wasn't getting through. And he was on the road all the time, so I couldn't sit down with him individually. I mean, he did not, quote unquote, have the time to sit down individually and go on with me. And I said, listen, brother, I want you to take our life skills class, but I want you to take it from this particular guy. Well, I knew this particular guy would just clean his plow for him. He was just all in his face. When he got done, he was a complete wreck. What needed to happen is exactly what I wanted to happen. I wanted somebody to shake that boy's tree for him. And that's exactly what except he was scared to death after he got done with the class, because the class sort of gives you some things to do, and he couldn't do it. And then he came to me and I said, well, listen, if you're actually interested in learning how to deal with what's motivating, because I said, I know they told you the right thing to do. As a matter of fact, they did a wonderful job of modeling it to you. He says, that's what scares me. He says, I'll never be able to do that. Well, can you see how I would get excited about that? Because now I got a guy that's broken, and I have the opportunity to demonstrate to him how Christ can, in a very real way, make the reality of what he saw, which was healthy, naturally become a part of his life. So we're not slamming or damning tools. We're saying that just putting out there how to get it right won't make it right for an individual. It's Christ's life in them that'll do it. And your role as the discipler is to deal continually with the root issues. Because you know what? I can tell you, I have not for any length of I have not long-term had somebody who is actually cooperating in Christ and abiding in Him when I challenge them about a particular area for them to move into, and this is where Christ would like to move you, and this is my counsel to you. This is what I suggest to you. This is a direction I think you need to go. If they were really abiding in Christ, they moved into it. Now, it may not have been the next day, but Christ was moving them towards that, and there was not a balk. Are you understand what I'm saying? One of the things that I want to give you, and then we're stopping we're going to have another session, and we're going to go into the whole structuring the Abiding Life office, and we are going to get done today. Hallelujah! Okay? But what I want to communicate to you, I don't want you going out of here thinking that you're somehow deficit in dealing with people and their struggles. What I want to tell you is, and again, I'll remind you, you've heard this several times, if they're sitting in front of you, you're God's best for them right then. You are. And if you find some model or something if you find something that is good and honorable and honors God and hopes and desires for the best in an individual, great, let them read it. That's super. Amen. If you find some tools that'll be wonderful and you want to go to a before I say I do, is that right? Before I say I do? Or no, not the say I do or I did or whatever it is. One of those, one of those marriage things. And have all that reflection. Well, hallelujah, I'm excited about that. But understand this. You can make a list for me. And if I am protecting my identity on a given particular day, I will not do it. I don't care how much you convince me of it. If I promised before God, put an extra ring on my finger, made a vow before God that I was going to do that thing, my job as a person that's discipling another individual is to help them discover how the enemy's attacking them and what part of it. Jesus said it. If you're going to live the life I've called you to, you must deny self, take up the cross, and follow. There's plenty of people who start the denying self part, but when the cross comes, they give up. It's my job to point that out for them, to help them to be the hand of God, to at least sound the alarm that you might be moving in a direction that's not going to do well for you. All material is good for me. Here's the beauty. We've quit fighting. Now, on the front end, one of my elders, and then I got to shut up for sure, okay, and I'm personally, one of my elders was really kind of, because he's bought into this, and he says, I don't want you sending anybody out to go in any secular counseling. And, I said, listen, brother, we don't have to worry about any of that. Because number one, you don't know what God's doing in the whole thing. And there's a lot of secular counselors out there that really are Christ-centered. There's a lot of Christian counselors out there that are Christ-centered. There's a lot of them that aren't. But I'm not in charge of all that. But one of the benefits to the people that I get to see, and you're going to have an opportunity to see, is probably they've been frustrated by whomever. If they've been seeing anybody, if they're seeing you, you're the bottom of the barrel. They didn't want to pay no more. They didn't want to do anything. It says you're the bottom of the barrel that they're coming to. And excuse me. And so you can be assured that God's going to use you in that. And He's used everything up to this point to show them what doesn't work. And anything that shows them what doesn't work is a good plan.